everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex, and this is Big Baby Reviews. Check out my comics, Big Baby and STARCRASHER at KINGCOMICS.CA. This is today, guys, issue 516 of BBR. We're taking a look at some Greg Capullo with X-Force, issue number 19, cover dated February 1992. This is kind of a transitory issue, I guess, between Executioner's Song, the end of that crossover, and the new kind of direction for X-Force, which will be kind of, to a certain extent, established in this issue. What it exactly is, not really, but what we're getting are new costumes designed by Boomer, which we'll look at as we go through the issue. And the cover really does kind of indicate, maybe not the most, evocative cover just as far as excitement goes. I mean, obviously there's a huge conflict here between Cannonball and Professor X, the new school versus the old school, X-Force versus the X-Men, right? The dream divided. Philosophically, they're going to be discussing that in this issue. So pretty interesting, actually. I was surprised with this one. It feels like it might be the first issue where Fabian Nicieza, I think is how you're supposed to say that name. I'm not sure. Kind of has a chance to breathe a little bit. He's had to pick up the slack as Rob Liefeld leaves, go right into Executioner's Song, and now it feels like here he's really going to kind of establish what's going to be going on next for X-Force, since Cable obviously is dead and no longer around. Whether or not he's going to stay dead, you know how that works. I guarantee you within a few issues we'll be seeing Cable again, of course, but for now he's not around, and this definitely is a precursor or a preview of what we're going to be seeing within the issue. So at least the cover is telling us what we're getting. So the cover, a little lackluster, honestly, but the interior art, pretty amazing and stellar all the way throughout. I feel like, once again, Capullo's really hit a plateau here. It's no longer a Rob Liefeld comic book. It's a Greg Capullo comic book, and he's kind of designing, these things here. It's like Cable's not around anymore, so Boom Boom has kind of incorporated some of his design sensibilities into her costume here. So it's kind of like feminine Cable with the shoulder pads. Like, he's taken everything Rob Liefeld established, but just, not quite as haphazardly, I guess, as Rob Liefeld does, right? It also feels kind of proper and functional and in the right spot, and for at least a certain level of comfort. The fact that she's got Boomer written down her thigh, I think, is hilarious. And just a great shot, which I feel is probably a little bit photo reference, but doesn't feel so. So it's like interpreted from a photo, which is always better. Feels like kind of the 90s supermodel kind of shots. And it just to reinforce that idea, Cindy Flippin Crawford, House of Effin' Style, I guess is what he was trying to say there. So definitely a reference to, fashion photography and fashion models of the era. I mean, this is it's very 90s, but I think it's a pretty awesome design. The color is a bit garish, maybe a little too exaggerated, but I think for Boomer that works, and that's what makes me kind of like this design here. So Fabian Nicieza, whatever, teacher's pet, Greg Capullo, charcoal genius penciler, Harry Candelario, inking bully. So I feel like, again, they've really come into their own. Greg Capullo and the inker on X-Force at this point does not in any way resemble a Rob Liefeld book anymore. And, I've complimented him before in past issues, and look at all these, like, when he's doing the technological backgrounds and stuff, just beautiful stuff. A little bit of Star Trek here maybe, but man, all this stuff is just great. And some good body language too. Obviously with Boomer, it's a little, she's a very exuberant out there character, so I feel like he takes advantage of that, but he does just some great body language stuff with her looking in the mirror here. And just this little shot here, which is, kind of listening to music or cheering or, dancing a little bit there. Whatever she's doing, it rings true with her character. And I think it's just a great bit of body language, and posturing in the drawing. And a lot of the scenes here, there's not many action scenes in this book. So, Capullo still shines and finds a way to make things interesting and dynamic. Different angles, right? We've talked about Capullo being very adept at drawing, bird's eye views and worm's eye views and stuff. And I've talked in past issues before, I'm starting to see that prototypical kind of facial construction on both male and female characters that Capullo's still pretty much using to this day, right? And that's not to say he's being lazy or anything. His style has constantly evolved, the aesthetics of it. The line work changes from project to project, which is another reason I love the guy, and I think he's such a great artist. But yeah, it's also just to say that from very early on, he already kind of had it. I turned to this page. It was great. It kind of harkens back a little bit to the New Mutants, or, the X-Men those great Jim Lee issues of Uncanny X-Men where they revert back to kind of the more classic yellow and blue X-Men costume, but kind of reinterpreted still in the Jim Lee aesthetic. And again, you're getting some of that image hatching here, but there's just something about Capullo's characters and postures and anatomy that's just so much more vibrant and moving and expressive than a lot of the other, image clones. Like, look at that shot of Farrell. There's some great body language stuff that, as I go through, I'll point out, because, yeah, he does some really good stuff there with her cat-like attributes, right? But this shot here, her mouth agape is just, like, so expressive. Even just this small shot of all this action. Obviously, guys, they're in the danger room, right, training. But just this little bit here, each character doing a different action, facing off against a different part of the danger room. Just one great little storytelling panel there. Again, the facial expressions on Farrell are just great. The way she moves and the way she uses her claws, right? Because again, of those cat-like attributes. And so this bit here, how great. First of all, I don't even know if the arrow was needed here. I think logically we would go that way and come back down. I guess someone figured this would catch your eye and pull you down a bit. But yeah, don't know if that's necessary, but whatever. Haven't seen that in a while. But this whole shot, like even just, I'm assuming this is Warpath, right? Without his Warpath costume, yeah. So just the naturalistic way he's kind of pulling his hair back there. He's probably been sweating and stuff. And this little touch that, I haven't seen yet of Farrell, but she's a cat. And yes, she probably would wash herself, right? That kind of is in tune with her characters. So I don't think the writer did this. Greg Capullo did this. And that's just such a nice little touch. She does it for 2 panels. And the fact that he grabs her from the back of her neck like you would a cat that's, trying to scratch you or something, or being feral or whatever. Just lots of fun here. Lots of interesting little, storytelling and character beats, right, in the artwork that you're not going to get from Rob Liefeld, for example. Just they don't go after the same stuff in their artwork. Yeah, the expressions, look at that on Farrell. It's just great. And the way she moves and her body language and her limbs are always kind of stretched out and clawing and stuff. Like, he's really heightening the cat-like aspects of the character. And even better, once they're, the action kind of dies down, we get Farrell just, after the hunt, or after the feast, maybe after they eat, cats usually start washing themselves, right? So I think this is the first time I've seen Farrell do anything like this, right? And she does it for 2 panels. And even another catism here where he picks her up by the back of her neck like you would a cat that is quote unquote feral. So all these nice little touches really add to the characters, storytelling, and just not something I would see Rob Liefeld do when he was on his run of X-Men, or X-Force rather. Just 2 different sensibilities, and they're not going after the same thing in their artwork. Get a little sequence with Siren and Warpath here, stealing some information off of the X-Mansion's computers back in the day when you did that on Laserdisc, the 90s. Just love this shot of Professor X here with a kind of heavy shadow on the side of his face. There's a bit of a John Buscema, Mark Silvestri kind of vibe here. Uncanny X-Men Mark Silvestri, which I've talked about before, how there's a little bit of that, I think, in Greg Capullo's art as well. But even these quiet moments, much like the last review I did for Ash, just the interesting ways in which, he's breaking out of the typical kind of layout 9-panel grid or 6-panel grid, but keeping things easy to read and easy to follow. I've probably said this a few times, but again, Craig Capullo stepped it up a notch, and I feel like just storytelling wise, because there's not so much action in this issue, it's a very character driven issue. He just is very adept at picking those angles and drawing things, making every conversation interesting, basically. And here's where, Cannonball's kind of arguing with Professor X about, the how is it they put it, the open hand or the closed fist, right? There's kind of the debate going on. So this is every Marvel artist's nightmare, right? Reading a script and says, when you turn the page, okay, give me a splash page of the helicarrier, the shield helicarrier. This has got to be like such a bitch to draw. And Kirby did the original, and it's like, how are you going to top that, really? And a lot of artists, I feel like, just go back and look at the old Kirby ones and kind of swipe most of it and do that. I feel like Greg Capullo put maybe a little bit more effort into it and made it into a somewhat slightly more realistic design, and maybe looked at photo reference of actual, airship carrier boats for the design, and looked at Scientific American or some sort of tech issue. It's very kind of precise. It's a sci-fi vehicle for sure, but I don't feel like, he's pulling from the basic Kirby design, but really making it his own, which is different from a lot of the other artists who, again, I feel just ape Kirby. I love this whole sequence with GW Bridge, right? The paneling, just the whole sequence and his whole expressiveness in each panel to kind of culminate here with a little bit of spittle coming out of his mouth. That's a nice touch. And now, again, here comes the, I guess, the fashion part of this comic where, like I said, it's a transitional issue. So we got new costumes, not a lot's going on. So we get Warpath's new costume, which I would say is probably the least kind of interesting of the issue. But they make a comment here, and I feel like it's a little bit of a jab at Rob Liefeld. So he says, "Okay, you were right, Boomer. It's not bad at that. At least now I can turn my neck without smacking myself in the chin with my shoulder pads." So I guess one of the main conceits of Warpath's costume was to get rid of the shoulder pads right away, or make the X-Force, costumes as little like Rob Liefeld costumes as possible, which I don't know. I say that, but then, like I said, Boomer to me just feels like a female Cable kind of look. Cannonballs is all right. I'm not sure about the color scheme, but yeah, this kind of works for me. It's funny how Cannonball's gone from a skinny nerd to like a fully buff kind of team leader, right? That can happen in comics just through, varying artists and different pencils. But also since he became an external, which again, I don't know if that's going to resolve at some point, but what a great shot once again. Body language, she's holding the leaves up, they're kind of falling down on her. Oh, like it's a little bit whimsical and kind of cheesy, but it works, right? Because you got to have the characters doing something. Like I said, they're not it's a very talky issue, and I enjoyed reading it, actually, to be honest. I thought it was pretty good, and part of that was the clever ways in which Greg Capullo made it interesting, even though it's just mostly an issue about a bunch of people talking to each other. These designs for the trees, very simple, very quick to get through. I feel like maybe he saw this in an Eric Larson book or something. Eric Larson does something very similar to trees, or with trees. And he does it all the way throughout. Wow, that's a time saver there. Smart. So we get our team shot. It's not Rob Liefeld's designs, but it's definitely very 90s, right? And you're still feeling that influence, I think. Maybe less so with Warpath. I feel with Warpath, we're going a little more closer to traditional kind of Aboriginal garb and stuff, even though it's a superhero costume. Added elements, right? Make it a little bit more culturally obvious, I guess is how I'd put it. But like Ricochet, is that who that is? I think. I correct me if I'm wrong. Someone out there in the comments. But yeah, his costume, yeah, not feeling that one so much. Shatterstars is kind of interesting, though. Again, still can't pull away too far off from what Liefeld established. So maybe Boomers is, I think, the most successful costume here, and it's definitely relying on Liefeld tropes. I thought this, I don't know, like if this is done on purpose, but his globulous head, I just thought that was a funny bit of cartooning just in this one panel here. Again, I don't know if that's because he's drawn quickly or if that's on purpose, but just, it still works, but it's hilarious. Great facial expressions. They're getting more and more kind of naturalistic as we go along Capullo's career. So this whole sequence is fun, right? Because this is how Sam's trying to get his point across to Xavier, right, about the open hand and the closed hand. But he says sometimes the closed hand is used to protect, to support, right? So you use protecting a mouse, and then obviously the same hand can hurt you when it's open, right? And, Professor X, you've made your point, everything, so you're on your own, X-Force. You don't have Cable, but, you'll he says it here, free to decide your own destiny, right? So it's a nice little kind of wrap up to this conflict between the original New Mutants who have become X-Force with Cable and Professor X, and now without Cable they can move on without the stewardship of Professor X. Stewardship? Is that how you say that? And just the fact that this little bit of storytelling here where Farrell, you see her actually stab the mouse in the silhouette here. You know, I'm pretty sure that's how you're meant to interpret it, right? But clever Marvel kind of way of throwing some violence off far in the background where, you know, the comics code at this point won't get upset. And pretty sure that Farrell's going to be chomping that one up. And off they go into some, you know, boom tube, teleportation portal, you know, convenient plot device. It's been used a lot in X-Men comics and others. And I guess we'll find out next issue where that destiny lies. Jeez, can't talk today. All right, guys, that does it for my review of X-Force issue number 19. If you're still watching after all those verbal blunders and you are still subscribed to the channel, thank you so much. I do appreciate all your support, you guys out there. If you're watching but you're not subscribed, please do so below. It only takes a quick second for you, and it really helps the channel out, helps us grow, helps get us out there to other people who are into comic books just like we are. And speaking of comic books, check out my creator-owned comic books, Big Baby and STARCRASHER. You can see all that at KINGCOMICS.CA. Everyone out there, thank you again for watching and have an awesome day.
Like, subscribe, like, subscribe.
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents STARCRASHER one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.